Let's check out this video from Ember, why I quit playing Elden Ring.
When Elden Ring first came out in February, I thought I would never stop playing. With how much replay value games like Bloodborne and Sekiro gave me, I could only imagine how long I would be playing Elden Ring with its vast open world and hidden secrets. But, to my surprise, it wasn't long. To be fair, in my first playthrough,
I think that before we even go any further, I think that it's important to mention that when it comes to Souls games, I also noticed that the more Souls games came out, kind of like the faster I would eventually stop playing them. Because, so for instance, Dark Souls 1, I have no idea even how many playthroughs there are in this channel. But, I mean, not in this channel, but like on my official YouTube channel. And even on Twitch, I also did multiple playthroughs on Twitch as well. But like, in my official YouTube channel, there's tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of playthroughs of Dark Souls 1. Because it was all very new to me. That type of game. It was like super alluring. Keep boom, 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 boom. Dark Souls 2, same thing. Tons of playthroughs on the channel. Bloodborne. Was Bloodborne the next one? I forget. I think it is. Bloodborne was the next one. Bloodborne, while I did do multiple playthroughs, it was not nearly as much as Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 3 was way less playthroughs. And I think that there are a couple of things here to unpack, which is, it is twofold. My personal reason is twofold. And that is, number one, how new something is. And so Dark Souls 1, again, was like the most new. Even though I played Demon Souls, but Demon Souls, I would, at least in my opinion, is a little bit harder to replay, if that makes sense. Whereas Dark Souls was a lot easier to replay. You just like replay Dark Souls. I could play Dark Souls right now and have a good time. It's like playing Dark Souls and just have a good time. Easily. So it is that. It is how new something feels, coupled together with how big it is. Because it's interesting that we all talk about, you know, oh, we need to have these massive games. And an interesting thing that I've noticed when it comes to Souls-likes, and this is specifically to me, I'm not sure if it's going to be the same for everybody else. I want to point that out. I'm not going to say that everybody should feel the same way as I do. I'm just saying this is how I feel. One of the things that I feel is the bigger a Souls game is, the harder it is for me to replay it, because I'm the kind of guy, I want to go and I want to collect every single shiny in a Souls game. I'm not like this in every game, but I'm like this in Souls games. I need all the shinies. Ruri, are you even going to use the Great Sight in this playthrough? No, but I need to have it. Rurikhan, you're doing New Game Plus. Why are you going after the Great Sight again? I need to have it. The one time that I didn't do this, and it was an experience that I was not a huge fan of, was when I was preparing the character for New Game Plus 7 with Pally time. Because, you know, getting every single shiny 7 times was not going to happen. So that was the one time where I played the game and I went like, okay, kill the 4 dudes, get the Lord Vessel, kill the boss, go. Kill the 4 dudes, get the Lord Vessel, get the boss, go. Boom, 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 boom. And I did all that. Because yes, we didn't edit our save files. We actually played the fucking game 7 times, which by the way was one more time than needed because the difficulty actually caps at +6, which is technically speaking the 7th playthrough, but it's only New Game Plus 6. That's when the difficulty caps. But we did +7 because there's this thing where everybody believes, no, +7 is the maximum difficulty. No, the 7th playthrough is the maximum difficulty, at least at the time, which is actually +6, not +7. So there's actually no difference. At least there wasn't back then. I don't know if things have changed or whatever. But, yeah, so the longer the game is and the less it feels like it's new, the harder it becomes to replay. But I don't consider that me quitting playing the game. I'm basically taking a break, and at some point I'll come back to it. Like, right now, I'm taking a break from every single Souls game, but I know at some point I'm going to go back and I'm going to play Demon Souls again. I'm going to play Dark Souls again. Dark Souls 2 is... that one I don't know, but Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne. I mean, Bloodborne, I've actually been itching for it, dude. Boomhammer's one hell of a drug. Excuse me. But yeah, that's just kind of like my view on that.
through the game, I clocked in probably double the hours of any other games in the series, but playing through it again just felt a little bit different. Something had changed. After some careful consideration, I came up with 3 reasons why I already quit playing Elden Ring. Number 1, the open world. While I think FromSoft's attempt at creating an open world was incredibly successful, it also came at a price. It sacrificed the replay value that other Souls games have due to its layout within the open world. To be fair, this is how most single-player games are. You play through the game once and you end it right there. And that's totally fine. With the amount of content Elden Ring brings to the table, one playthrough is more than enough to get your money's worth, which is why I don't have any...
I would also argue that, like, maybe it's because this guy, Ember, maybe feels kind of like the same way that I do about this, about the whole thing of I need to get all the shinies, need to get all the items. Because if you are not the kind of player that needs that, the amount of things that you actually have to do in order to progress the game is actually not nearly as much as you tend to do if you're doing a completionist run. So, you know, I also did 2 Elden runs. I did one on PC, then I did another one on console. And the console one was kind of like my completionist run. And then I was working on a 3rd one where I was going to do the special secret ending of the 3 fingers or whatever. And I haven't finished that one yet.
Real gripes with the game in comparison to other AAA titles. The problem lies within my expectations of a From Software experience. With the way the world is structured, once you've been to an area once, it's hard to feel the need to do anything there again unless you need a specific item there. Once you know what an area such as Caelid has to offer, are you really going to go through it again and willingly fight every single enemy? Most enemies drop an incredibly low amount of runes, and the only real incentive for fighting them is, well, there isn't any. There's little reward for fighting enemies instead of just running past everything to the next side of grace, which puts a huge dent on the replay value in this game, considering that that's the core element that made these games successful. Bosses are the only real way to get a substantial amount of runes to level up, but we'll get to that later. The freedom that the open world gives you was supposed to allow for smoother playthroughs once you know where you're going, but what it really does is cut out tons of content for you on your future runs. I honestly think having a more linear experience is stronger for these types of games, even though the...
Not linear. Linear is the wrong word. It's not even more directed. It's less open. As in, you don't want a linear experience in a Souls game. You always want to have choices as to where you can go. You don't want to be like, okay, here's the way that you go. You always want to have choices. Again, think Dark Souls. There's plenty of ways that you can go the moment that you arrived in... Is it Firelink? Jesus. It's like there's so many Souls games at this point. It is Firelink Shrine. But, you know, the moment you get there, there's so many places you can go to, right? There's a right, not a right, but like a intended path for you to follow, which you can kind of consider linear. But the game itself is not linear. So it's not the linearity of it. It's just you want to be able to choose like 3 or 4 directions as opposed to like, here's the entire world. Yeah, smaller. Isn't it interesting how, in a way, it kind of feels like Souls games work better in smaller packages? I think that is very interesting.
Open world has a nice change of pace. Number 2, the exploration. One of the biggest selling points for Elden Ring was the fact that you could go...
But I think it's also important to bring out, and I'm sorry I keep pausing, but I think it's also important to bring out the fact that, sure, the replayability is, you know, suffers from the fact that it's an open world experience, but the first playthrough is fucking amazing and extremely memorable, right? At least that's the way that I feel. So it becomes like a balancing act of what is more important, the replayability or the first time experience? Because fundamentally, once you get to the replayability point of Souls, I feel like that's when you're entering the more niche side of the community. Most people will play a Souls game once and then they're done. So it's like, what is the most important thing to follow? And I don't have the answer, by the way. I don't have the answer to this question. What is the most important thing to do? Replayability or a really memorable first experience? Right? It's weird. Yeah, of course I'm reacting to this, Dark Hero. You linked it. Of course I reacted.
anywhere and explore to uncover hidden secrets within the world. The problem with this in terms of replayability is that most of the things you uncover within the world are dungeons with reskinned enemies and bosses or unnecessary items that you'll never use. Realizing this in my—
Yeah, I'll tell you, that's another thing that I'll bring up. Jesus, so many pauses. And it's just like every time he speaks, he's bringing something up to my mind that I'm like, oh yeah, right, this thing as well. So the other thing that I will point out is like, look at Dark Souls 1, right? Every time you open a chest, like there are very few instances where you open a chest and it's like something that you don't care about. Every time you open a chest, like, oh, there's a weapon here, there's a piece of armor here, this chest is a mimic, blah, blah, blah. Like, I feel like there's always something there. In this game, most of the chests that you open, they got fuck all, dude. Like, I'm sorry. It's the truth. Which makes the opening of a chest a much less interesting activity, I find. You know? Like, opening a chest in Dark Souls 1 is much more meaningful than opening most chests in Elden Ring. And that's the other thing, because then you're thinking back, dude, do you remember how many chests I opened and all they gave me was like this stupid item that I don't even use? Because I barely even used crafting. I barely used the crafting system at all, if I even used it. I think the thing that I crafted the most was the little droplet things that will tell you whether or not it's safe to fall. Those were the things that I've crafted the most, because besides that, I don't think I crafted almost anything. So it's like I at least I have this idea in my head that if I was to replay Elden Ring, one of the things is like, I don't feel like opening up all the chests. I don't, because I already know that most of them don't have anything that I actually want. The moment you found the Great Axe and the Giant Crusher, though, yeah, those were magic, but those were very few and far between. Yeah. Yeah, dude.
First playthrough really put a damper on my excitement for exploration. It was fun finding new areas or dungeons, but once I knew how to get to the main areas I needed, exploring the world felt kind of pointless. My incentive in the beginning was bosses. I love bosses in these games, and I was determined to beat every single one of them. Using a melee build, likewise, I knew most of the rewards I'd be getting would be useless for me, but it was still fun seeing what items I might discover. But after about 100 hours of doing this, it became clear that the biggest reward I was likely to get from exploration was either a reskin boss or a mediocre spell that I would never use. And to be fair, it's absurd for me to even whine about this considering the amount of content that there is in this game without including these dungeons and puzzles, but the other games never felt like this. Also, it's obvious that I think
it's also important to point out that I think everybody understands that even though dude is making this video, he clearly loves the game. At least that's the vibe that I'm getting from what he's talking about. And I think that this type of criticism is important, despite the fact that I imagine, I don't know, that the community was probably not too happy. Because I think it is important to talk about these things, because there is a subsect of the community that wants these games more for the replayability than the first playthrough experience. But I kind of feel like this is where the community is a little bit at odds, because like I said, I believe the majority of players does that first playthrough and then they're done. And then there's the niche of the community that wants the replayability. And, you know, I kind of feel like, again, Dark Souls 1 still has some of the most replayability of the whole thing.
Exploration isn't going to be as exciting in your second playthrough, regardless of how great the items or bosses are, since you already know what's coming. And speaking of bosses, number 3, the boss fights. This is without a doubt the biggest reason I quit playing Elden Ring. I appreciate that they tried to approach them in a different way to appeal to newer players while also throwing veterans off, but I just don't think they executed this properly. First of all, some of the movesets were so insane that the fights just didn't even feel fair, with bosses.
Waterfowl dance is one hell of a drug, baby. Woo! Yeah. Who doesn't love waterfowl dance? Come on now. You gonna tell me you don't like waterfowl dance? Sheesh. Oh my God. Let me tell you guys. I beat her with the what was it called? The mimic tier. After it was nerfed. The nerfed mimic tier, not the super powerful one. I beat her using the mimic tier. I have no regrets. And I'll tell you more. People are really going to hate me for it. You know what I did to that Mimic tier? I had a hammer specifically made for that Mimic tier. It was a hammer that had the enchantment of that special attack that like slams down and heals you, because the Mimic tier was damn near useless after they nerfed it. It was terrible. So what I wanted is I just need a meat shield to stand there so that she doesn't target me all the time. Because, like, look, I'm getting too old. I'm 40 years old. My reflexes are not what they used to be. I'm not going to sit here for, like, friggin' 11 hours, some bullshit, fighting this boss. Forget about that. That's not my life anymore, right? I'm too old. So, what I had to do was I would equip myself with 2 hammers, with the one with the enchant on a dominant hand. I'd summon the Mimic tier, then I would put that hammer away, get my good hammer and a shield, and let's go.
Like Malekith or Millennia, it didn't even feel like I ever had a chance to fight back. And this game very much wants you to be aggressive, so it just didn't make much sense to me. There are bosses where I felt like I either had to fight them until I got lucky with RNG, or I had to use my Spirit Ashes.
And let me tell you another thing. You mentioned Malekith. Let me tell you something about Malekith. I was very close to pulling out the Mimic tier for Malekith as well. And it's not going to be for the reason that people are thinking. Because I actually enjoyed the Malekith fight a lot. The problem was, pretty much, I would argue like 90%, more than 90% of the bosses have a site of grace that is reasonably positioned close to the boss. Malekith's is not. It's just not. Go over here, make a right, go up the stairs, climb all the way up this long-ass road, and then go into the boss fight. It's like, bruh, too long. That run back was too long. And I think that was the only run back that really bothered me in the whole game, was Malekith's run back. I don't think there was another run back that I had in the game that I can remember off the top of my head that really bothered me. It was just that one.
They give you absolutely no time to heal or even attack for more than 1 hit at a time. I went back to Dark Souls 3 the other day and was shocked at how many hits I could get in at once. Instead of making the bosses do modest damage with larger health bars like Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring made bosses have smaller health bars but can easily one-shot you if you're not careful. This is actually a huge problem I had with the game Nioh. I loved the game itself, but no matter how far I got...
Nioh's different, dude. Nioh is all about making your build go online. That's all that Nioh is about, making your build go online, very much like in an ARPG. The moment your build goes online in Nioh, it is over. Like, nothing can stand against you. Literally nothing. No boss can stand against you. Like, one boss might catch you off guard and kill you, but Nioh is the progression in Nioh goes like this. You suck, you suck, you suck, you suck. You're overpowered. Like, that's it. That's the progression in Nioh. You suck, and then suddenly you're overpowered. Like, that is the Nioh progression. So it's like, Nioh is a different case altogether. Nioh is just designed to be like that because it has an RPG loot system. That's just the way it goes. My axe build was hilarious. Yeah, it was. Like, I don't know how many of you guys remember. You're talking about Nioh 1 or Nioh 2, though? Because, like, I'm talking about Nioh 2. Because Nioh 2... I remember that I was like, I'm trying to make these hatchets work. I'm going to make these hatchets work. And I even remember talking to Cowboy about it because he was doing like a hatchets build. And I was like, bro, hatchets suck. That's basically what I told him. Cowboy's like, I don't know if you do this thing and that thing, the other. Like, nah, bro. I swapped out of the hatchets, swapped into axe mode, and I was unstoppable. I shredded everything. It was this, like, you can watch the playthroughs in my main channel. Like, I straight up just like shredded through everything in Nioh 2 the moment I swapped to axe. It was disgusting. It was just like, I felt like the hatchets were very, very poor balance. I don't know if they fixed them in future DLCs or something like that, but when the base game came out, hatchets sucked. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Hatchets sucked.
In the game, I was always either 1 or 2 hits away from dying at all times. That just kind of feels like artificial difficulty to me. But I think if Elden Ring had adjusted this a tiny bit, it would have made them much more enjoyable rather than dodging a 15-move combo just to get 1 hit in every time. Aside from this,
I'm getting the vibe that he's just really salty about Melania. It's like, I mean, how many bosses have a 15-move combo? Like, slow your roll, dude. It was not that bad for most of the bosses. It was Melania, okay?
I have to discuss the reskins. Personally, I would rather have more bosses as long as it doesn't hurt the quality of the main story ones, but some of the reskins really devalued the main bosses. Having Estelle appear twice kind of ruined the experience of finding him the first time, and this happened with tons of bosses in the game. You can even find Margit again in the open world. I also didn't like how the Margit and Morgott fights were so similar, even though they were both incredible. It felt the same with Godfrey having his 2 forms.
It's almost like it's the same guy. It's almost like it's the same boss.
It just took away from the experience and made the fights not as desirable to come back to in another playthrough. Most of them felt way too easy or way too unfair, and it's not really a get good thing for me, it's more of an issue of how enjoyable they are. Obviously, you can fight Malekith a million times until you know his moveset perfectly, but the fight itself isn't even fun enough for me to want to do that. Someone like Gale, for example, could have a similar style of aggression, but I would still enjoy trying again because it's a fun fight. Bosses are my #1 reason because they are my favorite part of these games, and when they feel a bit lackluster, it really makes it hard for me to find a reason to continue playing. I'm hoping the DLC will fix some of these issues and bring us some of the best bosses we've seen so far, but honestly, my hopes aren't as high. I'd also love to see a PvP arena because that's another thing that made the game a bit stale for me. Duels are always pretty fun, but invasions just aren't even worth it anymore.
I made a whole video about the invasions thing when I realized how it worked, because I only realized how it worked a lot later. But like the invasions thing, the way that it works in this game, for those of you who don't know, it's like basically you do the finger thing, whatever, that puts you online. And the moment that you do the finger thing and you open yourself up for invasions, you get invaded. Like, that's it. It's not like in other games where you can kind of like, oh, I just want to be able to be invaded as I'm playing through the game. No, it's like you're basically summoning someone to come fuck with you, which takes away the surprise element. I've always liked the potential for someone to just invade you organically. As a matter of fact, I almost wish it was just an option in a menu. Just have like an option that says, allow invasions. And let me just press that button and keep it on. Like, I don't even want it to be an item or anything. Just allow invasions. Boom. And then just let people invade and fuck with me if I want to. And if I get frustrated, I go and I turn it off. Like, if that's the way that you want it, then do it like that. But like, the way that they did it in Elden Ring, I thought was terrible. Because like, there was no way for organical invasions to happen. It was always organized. It was just always organized. Every single PvP encounter that you would have, unless you're doing co-op. If you're doing co-op, then yes, then you can get randomly invaded or whatever. But if you're playing solo, there's no way to get organically invaded. It's basically like, okay, you want to summon someone to come fuck with you? Okay, here you go. Let's go.
Understand the changes they made for newer players to avoid them just getting invaded out of nowhere and getting stomped on, but that's, you know, part of the experience. Having a requirement of 2 people before anyone can invade you makes sense, but it lacks the intensity it used to have. Now, if I invade, it's basically just an instant gank of Rivers of Blood spam. I think PvP is probably what has the most potential to give these games
weapon balance, you know, but then again, weapon balance has always been a problem when it comes to these games. But I mean, I feel like Rivers of Blood and which one was the other one? The Moon Katana, whatever it was called, Lunar Veil or whatever the crap it was, I forget. Like those two was just like, bruh, yeah, Moonlight was a Moonveil Katana. I was like, bruh, nah. It's like, listen, y'all need to sort yourselves out, because that was like every invasion. That was like everybody's rocking those stupid ass weapons. Like, come on, dude. You have to basically pray that you get invaded by Peeve or something, or another streamer who's doing like some type of a theme build to have a fun fight, because otherwise it's just not going to be a fun fight.
Game's replay value, and they still haven't quite managed to get it right. I still love Elden Ring, but I don't see myself playing it through again anytime soon.
Yeah, me neither. It's just, the thing is, like I was saying, The
So this might be a bold move.
Hey, wait.
Elden Ring first
The thing is, like I was saying, with the fact that it's no longer as new as it was back in the day, like that is a little bit of a deterrent, right? Because the sense of something being new, like these mechanics, you've played these mechanics to an extent. There's new things and all of that, but it's a very familiar concept. Whereas back in Dark Souls days, it was very foreign for most people, so it was like refreshing, and it was something that we didn't really have that much of in the industry, right? And then couple that together with just the sheer size of it, the sheer scope of it, which again, like I said, it makes for a much better first experience because there's so much to discover. Which is again why I feel like a lot of players screwed themselves over by like watching guides and walkthroughs and whatnot in their first playthrough. Dude, you missed out so much. But like, it makes that first playthrough much, much cooler. But at the same time, it makes it so that future playthroughs are potentially not as interesting, at least not to me. I'm not saying it's the case for everyone, but it was definitely the case for me. Also, let's go ahead, make sure to like the video, make sure to give it some watch time. Like watch the video, leave it playing in the background, something. Don't just come in there and like leave the like and leave. Also, I like this guy's content. I hadn't seen this dude before. He's got good content.